Telling me to let me just let me
That clock keeps ticking like a metronome, and my thoughts keep telling me to get me home, but my balls keep telling me to let me just let me
Today we are going off the beaten track and discussing a topic that is very widely debated and probably will be for a very long time, and that is the field of replica watches and whether it's ever acceptable to own one. Now, it is a very big question. It is something that people really scorn and hate, and I'm also one of them. But there's one reason or one caveat that I can add that might be beneficial to you. Now, at first glance, this looks like an Omega 300 Professional Seamaster. And if I compare this to other models of previous generations, you can see that it is not. If we look at it closely, and to anyone who has a good eye, you can see that this is not a real watch. If you look at the dial, even though that logo is well embossed and it even says Seamaster and Professional Coaxial and Swiss made, this watch is made in China. And things like the color scheme throw it off, the end links throw it off, but little additions like the bezel and all the rest, but I'll get into that at a later stage. Now you're probably asking yourself, IDGuy, this is a fairly respectable watch that is affordable in the scheme of things. It costs maybe £2,000, $2,500 when you buy it. And I can tell you that £2,000 is a lot of money. It can cost you 2 months' rent. It is the price of a used car. It is 40 trips to the grocery store. So in our day-to-day life, owning a watch like this, something that tells you the time, it's 300 meters waterproof, it's made of stainless steel by a very formidable brand. It's one hell of a luxury. And it's an interesting topic to discuss. So let's get into more details about it. Why did I buy this watch? Why was I interested in this model? Well, Baselworld was an interesting year this year, 2018, because Rolex released a very interesting Pepsi GMT that uses a Jubilee bracelet all of a sudden, something that I incorporated on my Batman GMT a little while before, which is quite interesting. And Tudor brought out the new Black Bay GMT, another example. But Omega did something quite different and released their 25th anniversary Seamaster Professional. They have completely reworked the watch. They've changed the size. They've changed the way the bracelet works. They've resized the dial. I'll show you a picture on the left-hand side to just show you what I mean. It's very nice. I mean, they've moved the date from the 3 o'clock to the 6 o'clock position. It's a lot more balanced. The movement has been completely reworked. It now has Meta's certification, which is basically Omega's idea of certifying their own movements above and beyond COSC chronometer certification. So it's fascinating. It's a really fascinating watch, and I believe it's going to be extremely popular when it does finally come out at the end of August. So the question is, will I enjoy wearing that watch if I decide to drop near to £3,000 on it? And I thought, well, the only way I can really experiment is to see if I would enjoy wearing a Seamaster. I had never held or owned a Seamaster before. So I thought, well, it might be a nice idea to try and see what it feels like. So I went scouring the internet and I found I think this cost about £30 to bring over. A very cheap, very affordable watch that is horrifyingly well detailed. And let's actually break it down and go through some of the details just for fun. We look at the bezel. It's pretty well centered. It's a little bit offset. It does not have a 90 click rotation, but it's pretty well sounding. It's not bad. The date aperture is very well seated in the side. You can see there's an additional numeral on the right. The hands are very well styled. The second hand has a red slice on it. The bezel, now these are some aspects that you can criticize that are different to the real thing. The bezel is a completely different color. The numeral layout is for the ceramic model, as I'll show you. But the bezel is made of aluminium. And the color layout is also wrong for what this watch is. It even incorporates a wave pattern, which is quite mind-blowing because You just don't see this level of detail in a lot of watches. And then it gets worse when we actually rotate it around, because you start looking at the engraving, which is not the best thing at the back, but it's pretty well done. And then you open it up and you look on the inside, and you'll be able to see that even the underside of the clasp has engravings for what kind of stainless steel it is. It even has the Omega logo on the right hand side there. So the details are astounding. It even has a flip lock clasp, a diver's extension. So it's quite horrific what these watches are going for nowadays. The fact that these are blatant rip-offs of the real thing. This is not a Swiss movement by any means. I'm sure you can hear that. But it's a pity that these watches have had to be marketed and sold this way. So the only reason why I bought this watch was to determine whether or not I could wear the Seamaster 300 every day and enjoy it. Because as it is, it's a 20mm thick bracelet that doesn't taper, runs all the way down. The case is about 41.5mm. It has a screw down helium valve, and this one just spins. It does have a thread to it, surprisingly. It even has the Omega logo embossed into it, which is insane. But at the end of the day, this thing was just bought to be worn and to be experimented with. And whenever I'm asked if it is a real thing, I say, no, it's a replica. I'm using it just to test and see whether or not I want the real thing one day soon. So my philosophy is that when you buy a watch like this, you are spending $30, £30 on something that could possibly save you $3,000 when it comes to buying the real thing. Whether or not you enjoy it is up to you, but being able to experiment with something along the lines of this before finally pulling the trigger is a good thing. But the controversial part of it is what actually happens to the people who make these things. Whether it is exploitative of certain people, whether it is mass marketing, whether the price of these things are well funded, because the manufacturing, the machinery that goes into making these things, I mean, down to the latter, talking about the bezels and the case shape and all those little details, it is not cheap to do. It is really not cheap to make something like this. So it goes to show that the fake industry is massive, which is very depressing. And saying this while holding one is also very depressing, because I've paid money of mine to test one of these things out, knowing that I'm helping fund a syndicate. So that is all I'm going to be covering on this topic. And really, at the end of the day, the only time I deem it worthwhile to buy a replica watch is when you intend on spending real money on the real thing. And when people ask you if it's a replica watch or if it's a real one, tell the person the truth. There's no point in hiding the truth from someone, because they'll eventually find out. And there's a great stigma affiliated to someone who lies about what they own. So thank you very much for watching this extremely controversial video about replica watches. I'll be posting new videos soon, and I'll catch you in the next one.